Welcome to the Exempt List, part of the Zero Bliss podcast family. I'm your host, Charles McDonald. It's a big week around here. 29, I turned 30 on Sunday. My life is flashing before my eyes. I know. It's been a long, let's call it 36 hours of introspection and listening to old music that used to make me happy when I was 21. But we're gonna power
I didn't realize you were a May baby.
Oh yeah,
I didn't realize you were a May baby. So am I. So yeah,
hey,
nice.
Well, happy 30th birthday to you too.
Soon. Thank you. Yeah, I haven't been 31 in a couple of years.
Well, no, because I've been our very good friend Ben Solak just had a baby, and congratulations to him and his wife. But I've been bullying him because I was like, make sure that me and your baby are birthday twins, and you kind of failed on that for me.
God, what a letdown.
I know. It came out a week before my birthday. Like, we could have been locked in. Me and little Lydia, we could have been locked in for life. So we'll see if
her loss.
Yeah, her loss. We'll see if she gets accepted into the family now. But right now, she's fighting her way up. There's still, this part of the NFL calendar is tough, right? Because there's just not a whole lot going on. Like right before the show, we try to get into news from the past week to break down before we get into like the actual football conversations. And Steven, here's what I have for you. Quarterback weight news. We're going to take the temperature on some of these, or just ask how much we care or how surprising some of this news is. We got 3 items to get through. Bryce Young from the Panthers has gained weight. I don't know the exact amount, but he has gained weight.
Hopefully a lot.
Hopefully a lot. Because I don't think he's going to be getting much taller. So one thing you can do to help counteract that is just kind of be a little meatball out there. Worked out for Russell Wilson. It worked out for some other guys. But the other 2 pieces of quarterback weight news I actually found a little shocking. Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who is like in the middle of a soft holdout, even though he did show up to OTAs as he tries to get a new deal. My good friend Cam Wolf for NFL Network reported that he is down 15 pounds, 10 to 15 pounds, and now he's at 220, which is like Tua was pushing 240 last season.
I know he got a little thicker, but like 240 just doesn't make sense given that he's 5'11"?
Yeah, he's like 6 feet.
He's like not the tallest quarterback.
Right, but like, because like when you're getting to that range, like let's call it 6'1", right? 6'1", 235, like that's Dak Prescott sized. Like Dak Prescott's 6'2", 240. Like, I don't know, when I look at Tua, he just doesn't look that big to me. So I was kind of surprised that he's down 15 pounds to 220.
I happened to see the report like on NFL Network that Cam did. And like at the end, he was mentioning how the Dolphins kind of asked him to put on this weight to get through the season without injuries. And at the end, they were like, yeah, they saw him do it last year and he got through the season. Now he's back down to his weight. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, why don't you keep the weight on? You got on, like, it worked. Why are you going back?
You did the one thing that people were really concerned that you couldn't do, which is finish a football season, right? So I was kind of surprised that I think the decision to get down to that way is interesting because, if he wants to improve the mobility, like, I think you can argue something that's Tua shouldn't be doing, like running around out there. Like he's good enough to pop off like the Blake Bortles runs where, I run a 4.8 and I can get 8 yards if I scramble. But like actually being a mobile quarterback, you're putting yourself in harm's way before you get the money. Like, I don't know. Yeah. This doesn't make sense to me.
He's not talented enough to be that type of player. What was like the old quote about Peyton Manning? The Colts coach said it was like, we don't practice or whatever.
Yes.
If 18 goes down, we don't practice. That should be how Tua approaches this. If you're scrambling Tua, something has gone horribly wrong. If the ball is in your hands after 1.5 seconds in that offense.
After 1.5 seconds, if you haven't thrown it, something terrible is going to happen, which is probably right for how they operated last year.
Yeah, especially Tua.
Yeah, but the idea that like Tua and Dak Prescott were around the same size last season is really hard for me to compute. Just like looking at them, So we'll see how that works out. They're going to pay Tua. Shoot, the Jared Goff contract has really opened the floodgates, I think, for what Tua can pull off from the Dolphins because, when you go to the negotiation table, you and I, we can sit here and say, I don't know, but if I'm Tua and his agent, all I got to do is just plop down the stats. Just say, hey, look at what happens. 55, please.
I wrote about after the Goff contract. I wrote that like exactly what you just said. People like you and me can question Tua all they want, but that agent's going to go down there and he's going to compare Goff's stats to Tua's stats, and Tua's just been better across the board over the last 2 years. If you go back 3 years, it's a wide gap. So if I'm Tua's agent, I'm like, we're starting at $55 million per year, and that's not where we're ending either.
Yeah. The Burrow contract is a framework, and then Trevor's going to get paid too, which is going to be one of the worst days on the internet. And we can get to that later once we get into what we're going to talk about today, which is, teams that kind of messed up the offseason and teams that nailed it. But the last piece of quarterback weight news is Lamar Jackson, the reigning NFL MVP, is, according to Diana Rossini, is 205 pounds right now, a 25-pound drop-off from where he was last year. Why?
I don't know. Why does Lamar Jackson have to get faster? Like, you have plenty of speed, man.
Right.
Just stay on the field. Stay healthy.
Well, because even at 230 last year, the thing is, like, I remember when scouting Lamar at Louisville, it's like, yeah, he's fast, but he's not the fastest player in the NFL. The value comes from him being able to make people miss and then accelerating off of that. And even at 230, it's not like that was an issue for him last season. Maybe he's not putting up like the same rushing stats he was like during the 2019 MVP season, but he's still absolutely one of the most fearful players with the ball in his hand once he gets moving downfield. So to get down to 205, I was just like, dude, that's way too small.
I wonder what that means. Like, I wonder what it means for the offense. I think there is some signal there that, like, they drafted Devin Leary at the end of the third round, which has gone against like how they've acquired their backups for Lamar. It's always been like, oh, we want someone like Lamar. And then bringing in Leary is like, we want someone the opposite of Lamar, because Leary is nothing like that. So I do wonder if this is like a signal that maybe we're not going to lean on the quarterback run game as much going forward, which I would like, as a Lamar fan, I would be happy to see that, because I think he's a quarterback talented enough to kind of, still be a top quarterback without that part of his game, like being a heavy part of his game. So maybe that's what this is about, and they don't want him taking the punishment because he's just not going to be in harm's way. If that's the case, then I'm all for it. But if they're going to continue to call plays the same way, I'd rather have Lamar with some armor on his body.
Right. And also, I think it's good for him to stay up at like the 230 area, because dude, this offensive line is going through a little bit of a transition this year. Morgan Moses is off with the Jets. You got most likely a rookie starting at right tackle in Rosengarten, who they drafted from Washington. You lost John Simpson to the Jets, so there's going to be some, movement on the interior. And also, Ronnie Stanley, still kind of a TBD in terms of like if he ever gets back to the pre-knee tears and Achilles tears version of himself, because Ronnie's interesting. Like, he'll have spurts, maybe for like 5 plays a game in a row where he's like, oh, there he is. There's the old Ronnie, but it's still hard for him to put it all together. So I think about Lamar with what on paper could be a Patrick offensive line. Man, you better get back in that cafeteria.
Yeah. No.
What is this?
Maybe he has more faith than we do, but yeah, they got like Ben Cleveland starting now. They got basically a rookie starting at left guard too, and a real rookie starting at right tackle. Yeah, it could be rough early on. I do think it will help them later on, because one thing that was kind of undercovered about this team was how weak the offensive line really was at the end of the year. When they played the Chiefs, I think we were both at that game. I asked Drew Tranquil in the locker room, like, because a big talking point was how they didn't run the ball more, the Ravens, and he was like, well, they didn't have anything at the point of attack. Like, they tried to like knock us back, and we were knocking them back, and that's why they couldn't run the football. So I think getting a good offensive line will allow them to like call a more diverse game, and maybe they won't just fall on Lamar like they did last year in the playoffs.
Yep. So we'll see how the 205 goes. Honestly, man, these guys can change their bodies so fast. I wouldn't be surprised if Lamar is like, once August rolls around, if he's like 220. Yeah, I don't know. Because I remember last year when I went to Ravens camp, did a story in their offense, and like Odell had it was one of the first days Odell was talking to the media as a Raven, and he was like, it's kind of a slow ramp up in terms of sometimes like how you peak out. So Odell, he was like, I want to be at my peak in week 10, not in week 2. So maybe this is like a ramp up period for Lamar, but some of these guys, like they they really do just exist on a different plane physically. So like Lamar is one of those guys who could probably get up to 220 by August and be totally fine and not have any issues with it. But, and late May, 205, I do think that that's a newsworthy point to talk about for a second.
Probably good on the knees, huh? Probably good on the knees.
Yeah. Do we care about these wide receiver holdouts? T. Higgins, Justin Jefferson.
Jefferson's going to get signed. I don't care about that.
Right.
Like, you listen to all of them talk all offseason. They're like, we're going to pay him. He's the best receiver in the NFL. We know that. The T. Higgins one is really interesting to me, but I think they end up keeping him this year. I don't know why you wouldn't if you're Cincinnati. At least go for one more run with this core and then see what happens after the season. But if they end up without T. Higgins going into the season, that's a disaster. Like, we're talking about the most confounding off seasons. Like, put the Bengals at the top of the list if they lose T. Higgins between now and September.
Right. And I think with T, I'm with you. You just got to give it one more shot. But also, like, if you look at their cap situation, they're in a spot where they can pay T if they want to, and pay Jamar. You've already paid Burrow, and they don't really have a whole lot of other big contracts that would make this like a challenging situation to piece together, because it doesn't seem like they have any intentions on, giving Trey Hendrickson what he wants on the defensive side of the ball. And when you start looking on that side of the ball, they don't really have too many big contracts. So like the fact that this is still like an issue for them, knowing that this offense has largely been successful because of like a player-led movement on the field. I don't know. I don't really get what they're doing.
Just do the Peyton Manning thing. Like, do the Peyton Manning, Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, and just be the Colts of this generation. I don't see what's the problem with that. I think, like, in Joe Burrow, you have a quarterback where, we've seen him work around a bad offensive line. We know the stress those two guys on the outside put on a defense. And like you said, they haven't been drafting well on defense lately, so they have nobody to pay. I can't really think of anyone on the offensive line they have to pay. Like, just pay him. Don't let good players leave the building. You found a blue chip player. I think he was a second round pick. Like, why would you let that leave the building, especially someone with such good chemistry? And like, his game meshes so perfectly with what Joe Burrow wants to do, like the back shoulder fades, the contested balls, the perfect ball placement. I really don't understand even letting it get this far, get to this point. I would have signed him last year.
Yeah, but they're the Bengals. I feel like we've talked about for the entire time that I've been watching the NFL, just them being cheap and not wanting to actually just like put a foot forward and get things done early. But I don't know. This makes no sense. But I do think you got to give it one last run before you end up trading him, because especially now that we're after the draft, like, what's the point? What's the point?
In our little Madden franchise, we have an online Madden franchise we're both in. I traded T. Higgins last year to Nate Tice, and then he beat me. And T. Higgins went off for 100 yards. So that's my advice to the Bengals. That's my cautionary tale. Do not trade T. Higgins.
That's a good segue into what we're going to talk about today, which is teams who have had some puzzling off seasons, some teams who have had some good off seasons. Those of you who have been listening to the show over both our iterations of it, no, we're going to start with the bad stuff, because that's always funnier, and it gets people riled up when you tell them that their favorite team is bad, even though their favorite team never gives them anything of substance, and it's almost always embarrassing and painful to root for them. So the Falcons, my favorite team.
I was going to say, that sounded personal. That sounded like something you really felt.
No, it is personal. It is personal because I still am not over how hard my phone and my Twitter mentions blew up when they picked Penix at 8. I was like, wow, you guys are like really in this to watch me feel bad about there's something that I've cherished since I was like 6 years old. Okay. I see how this is, but no, they did have an absolutely puzzling offseason. And I think when you look at where they were last year and where they are now and what they've added, I don't know how much better they've gotten as a whole. Like, you add Kirk Cousins, which is obviously a big upgrade from where they were. You get Darnell Mooney. So like, your offense in theory should be set, but like on defense, they didn't add anything. Unless you're banking on like Rook, the Clemson defensive tackle they drafted round 2, becoming something right away, which I think is a little foolhardy to believe that. You have Grady Jarrett coming off an ACL injury, and he's 30 plus, so who knows how that's going to turn out. And quietly, I felt this during the season, but my fan pride wouldn't let me say it. That defense was pretty overrated last year. They didn't have a whole lot by the way of dudes outside of like AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates by the end of the season. And I do think that Ryan Nielsen did a good job, but they were beaten up on a lot of bad offenses. And they didn't quite have the personnel to actually make plays against the more talented offense in the league. So I don't know. I think they kind of wasted the offseason. I don't think they're nearly as good as they think they are. And I think this could be a pretty rude awakening for them once they start playing some of the better offenses in the league.
Yeah, the Falcons have just been like an annoying team, even if you're not a fan of them, even if you don't have a rooting interest, just over the last couple of years. Like, and there is a model for the Kirk Cousins offseason. Like, look at what Tampa Bay did when they got Brady. They didn't waste their resources on a backup. They didn't waste their resources on kind of like building a foundation. They're like, screw that. We're going all in. We're bringing in all of Tom's friends, even if they might have some mental issues they have to work out.
Gronk, you mean?
We're bringing them all. And I'm not talking about Gronk now. I'm talking about AB. We saw how that ended. And then like the defense was loaded already, and they really leaned into that rather than like, oh, we're gonna have our cake and eat it too. Like the talking points with the Penix thing just make no sense to me. Like they're like, oh yeah, now we have our quarterback for right now, and we're set up for the future. It's like, you're the Falcons. You don't get to do long-term planning. No, like that's what the Chiefs and teams like that get to do, not you. So it really does feel like a wasted opportunity. I thought the Penix pick, like, I'm not a big fan of him as a prospect, but my analysis of that pick goes far beyond that. I just think it's a wasted opportunity. I think the opportunity cost of not taking maybe an impact defensive player there. I know that's what they were mocked to take. Like Dallas Turner was like 80% of the mocks he was going to them. And I really think that would have helped them take a larger step this year. Because like you said, they don't have dudes on defense, especially dudes that you can craft a game plan around. Like, you can't craft a game plan around having a good center field safety,
right?
Unless it's Earl Thomas. You can't craft a game plan around having one good quarterback, because guess what? They can just throw to the other quarterback. They need defensive linemen. They need front seven. And the thing with Raheem Morris is, like, he's such like a good like a coach, a good team builder, good philosophy builder. But I do think that takes time to build a foundation. You have to get rid of the guys who aren't aligned with your vision. You have to bring in guys who are. And you don't have time in Atlanta. You have a 36-year-old quarterback with a bad Achilles.
Yeah. I think the Falcons have done a tremendously poor job of self-scouting this offseason. Like they seem to think of themselves as like a Super Bowl contender, which is just not even close to reality. And also, like, when you bring up like a Mahomes or a Jordan Love situation, which they keep bringing up, like Alex Smith was already on the Chiefs for several years before they drafted Patrick Mahomes. Aaron Rodgers was Aaron Rodgers, but like, you know, he was kind of on a bit of a downswing when they took Jordan Love before he bounced back and then had the 2 MVP seasons. So this is not that, man. You made both moves in the same offseason, which is obviously not such a great use of resources, and I think it'll bite him in the ass, but so many things do, and I just keep coming back. I just keep going back.
The most egregious thing, though, over the last couple of years, which they couldn't really follow the Bucs model here too, is they should have just went back to the old throwbacks.
Yes,
I really think that's the genesis of all their problems, is these terrible uniforms.
Yeah, Arthur, look, let's not get me started on Arthur Blank, all right? Because I've said some bad things about Home Depot over the past few months, and I don't.
Are they a sponsor?
No, I just don't want them on record.
Yeah, who cares then? Yeah. You're gonna go into a Home Depot one day and like some 2x4s are mysteriously gonna drop on your head.
You're just gonna see me with Joker face paint on, like burn down all the Christmas trees today. All right, let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have also had a puzzling offseason. I really think it just boils down mostly to the Ridley, Josh Allen situation, where they just kind of bungled that and were forced into drafting Brian Thomas in the first round when they really didn't have to do that if they were just proactive on the Josh Allen contracts. But are there any other areas on this team that give you hesitation for the upcoming year, and, you know, areas that will make the Trevor Lawrence discourse worse than it already is?
I would just say, like, how they've gone about fixing their weaknesses. There's been a trend over the last couple of years. It started with the receiving core last year, how they just overspent for what I would consider a lot of mid talent. And then with Ridley, it was obviously like, we don't know what to expect from him coming back. But I feel like they kind of done the same thing with the offensive line this year, like just overpaying for for guys that do fill a hole and could be good cogs in your offense, but you never want to be paying above market prices for like B talent. Like 80 overalls is what I would say. And that's what they've done. And it's just a continuation. I feel like the four scariest words for any NFL owner would be Trent Baalke coming to me and saying, I have a plan, because his plans never work out. And I think that's like the story of the offseason is if Baalke is this like genius team builder, like this genius eye for talent that I think he operates as, we would have seen it play out this offseason. I think this was the big offseason for them. This is the offseason they needed to nail. And he had a plan that was laid out very publicly. Like, I think everyone knew what their plan was with Ridley. And for it to backfire so, like, just blow up in their face, like, so quickly, I think is a real red mark for them. And if I was Shad Khan, if I was the owner of the team, I would be looking at the front office, especially after this offseason, and be like, how do you have faith that this guy is going to make the right moves? How do you have faith that he's going to nail an entire offseason? Because that's what you need. They need like a, what year was it when the Saints had that one big draft and they really turned things around?
2017.
They need that type of year. Otherwise, I feel like this is a sinking ship, even with Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, it's just crazy to see. Like, I feel crazy when I watch the Jaguars game and I have to go on Twitter and see people talk about how bad Trevor Lawrence is. You know, and this is the Jaguars' fault totally for this being a thought in people's minds, and not really just being a thought, but like almost the overwhelming opinion. Like, I wrote an article last week that, you know, when the Trevor Lawrence contract comes, don't be surprised by it. Like, this is what they have to do, and he's also earned it. And it got like 400 comments. Like, an article about the Jaguars where people were vehemently disagreeing with the idea that Trevor Lawrence is a candidate for like a market rate quarterback extension. So that's the Jaguars' fault, because they actually do have a franchise quarterback. And the fact that people are still wishy-washy on it means they just haven't built up enough around him. And I just don't think they did enough this offseason too. And it's just a weird way to like approach such a pivotal offseason. And you started off with a huge mistake by letting Calvin Ridley hit free agency and walk to a division rival. Like, that is insane.
Just think it was a divisional rival that could only offer one thing, and that's like decent weather. Being in that, like, what else are the Titans offering?
Money,
like, that you can't offer.
$23 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, but the Jaguars are willing to pay a receiver. We know that much, but we've seen the margin for error that Trevor provides this team. Like, this wasn't a very good roster 2 years ago when they won a playoff game and they were competitive with the Chiefs on the road, the eventual Super Bowl champs in the playoffs. Like, I forget who fumbled. Was it Jamal Agnew? They're a Jamal Agnew fumble away from like playing a coin flip game against the eventual champs. And that was just 2 years ago. And that roster was not good. Like, no one would look at that roster before the season and be like, this is a divisional round roster. Like, the offense was mid at best. The defense, which we saw over time play out, could be exploited. And they still came that close to competing with the Super Bowl champ. So Trevor Lawrence has done enough for me to warrant that deal. And you're fooling yourself if you don't think that the talks with them start at $60 million, because that's the going rate for a quarterback right now. That's the going rate if you kind of compare what he's done to what Jared Goff has done and what contracts he signed. That's what he's going to sign with. $60 million is the starting point.
Yeah. Whew, this course could be bad that day.
Yeah, terrible.
5-year, $300 million contract for Trevor Lawrence.
We're going to look like the crazy people to be like, good deal, good money.
Yep. Speaking of a team which has a money situation at quarterback, the Dallas Cowboys, very puzzling offseason. Dude, I don't get it. I don't get what Jerry's doing here. And people have tried to explain it to me like, oh, just you play out the season and then see what happens. It's like, dude, that is the worst. I feel like that's the worst possible way that you can handle this, because right now, I've said it a million times before, it's one of the most baffling things of this entire offseason to me. The Cowboys are letting Dak Prescott walk into the season with a $60 million cap hit on their roster, which just, it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. And like, there's two obvious ways to kind of handle a situation like this: trade him or extend him. And I feel like his value would be pretty high. If I went out back in March and I dangled Dak Prescott on the NFL trade market and in like an earnest way to reset and rebuild the roster, because for whatever reason, I don't want to do this anymore. You could probably get 3 first-round picks for him, right? And you know, they're also not committed on extending him. So you're kind of in a situation where the value that you've accumulated up to this point is just in flux, right? Okay, well, if Dak has a supernova season this year, what is he going to ask for, like $63 million per year next year, which is what you wanted to avoid when you signed to a contract like 5 years ago on the $40 million a year one? Or if he tanks it and he plays terribly because they haven't been able to put pieces around him because of this cap hit number that's sitting there, then what do you do with the trade market? You get diminished return on what you could have had this year. I don't get what Jerry's doing at all. And it kind of feels like he doesn't understand what he's doing either, especially playing hardball with CeeDee Lamb while the Eagles get 2 wide receiver extensions done in the same offseason. It's just very, very strange to me.
I feel like we have to like relitigate Jerry Jones's reputation as being like this like shrewd, he's gonna play hardball businessman. Like going back to even like the Zeke stuff, he kind of got played by Zeke. Like Zeke held out and got his deal and got paid, and then it was like washed like 2 years later. Dak, last time this happened, it was like it played out the same exact way. He tried to hold out on Dak, he tried to play hardball, tried to make Dak prove it in a prove it season, and then Dak did, and then ended up making like $50 more million than he would have. And I think the same thing is going to happen here. But I agree with you. I feel like it's either extend him or trade him. The one thing they're doing is the one thing that they can't afford to do, like literally can't afford to do. A $60 million cap hit is just insane. And I think it's a simple question they have to ask themselves. Over the next, 4 years, let's say you have to give them a 4-year contract. Over the next 4 years, are we going to find a quarterback better than Dak Prescott? And how? And the answer is no. It's just realistically no. Unless you get the first overall pick and Caleb Williams comes out, it's not happening.
Well, there's also a lot of hubris here too, I think, because of quite frankly, they stumbled into 2 back-to-back franchise quarterbacks with investments that are like 99th percentile outcomes, right? You got Tony Romo as a UDFA. Then you come back 2016, where this is the year before they could trade compensatory picks. So you were still locked into that spot no matter what. They tried to trade up for Paxton Lynch. They couldn't get it done. So 4th round comp pick comes around. The NFL says you're still not allowed to trade him. F it. We'll take a quarterback here. We'll take Dak Prescott. And then it works out in this manner. So I feel like in Jerry's mind, Jerry probably thinks that he can get a quarterback anywhere, even though he did try to trade up for Paxton Lynch in the year that they drafted Dak Prescott, you know?
That's right. and think about this, like, think about how much, like, we talk about, like, the Packers and the Colts for not winning more when they kind of, like, inherited the same situation. They go from Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck. The Packers obviously go from Favre to Rodgers to Love. And those teams only have 3 Super Bowls combined over the last 3 decades to show for it. The Cowboys don't have anything. And they, like you said, they got even luckier. At least the Colts had to get the first overall pick to get their 2 guys. The Packers had to use 2 first-round picks to get their guys. These guys, like you said, a 4th-round pick and a UDFA who become,
franchise quarterbacks.
I would argue, top 5 quarterbacks of their generation, respectively, and you can't get to the NFC Championship. Like, that falls on Jerry and Jerry alone. We can talk about Wade Phillips. We can talk about Jason Garrett. We can talk about Mike McCarthy all we want. But who hired those guys and who sat around while they blew these rosters? Like, Jerry's failure since the Jimmy Johnson era has not been documented enough. I think we need to relitigate his reputation.
Dude, you had 20 years of quarterback play that most teams would kill for. They would kill for like 80% of the quarterback play that you've had for the past 20 years. And you've done nothing with it. And now it seems like he's going to blame Dak for not being able to get anything done this year when the resource allocation has been pathetically awful. Like, 8-year-old playing Madden franchise for the first time level of bad. And I don't know what cap space means. I don't know what expiring contracts mean. I'm still kind of figuring this out for the first time. That's how they've run their team. And I really hope it's not going to happen, but I really hope that if/when the Cowboys struggle this year, we remember the inaction of the offseason that kind of got them to this point. Because I think, dude, when you look at the rosters and start comparing them, they have fallen off from where the Eagles were last year. Like, I think it's going to be kind of tough for them to stay and compete unless they get some crazy development for some rookies and some second-year guys that maybe you're not even expecting. And obviously, Mike Zimmer comes in and steps in and does a good job. But we got two more teams before we get to the ad break. Around, not really a team for this one, just an idea. The Jared Goff contract situation. I'm going to be honest. When that deal first came across, I didn't realize like where he ranked in terms of like the quarterback contracts, because I thought that some other guys had gotten some more money than him, but no, it's just Joe Burrow, which is like, whoa. You're locked in.
He carved out like his own pay scale. Like before him, there were two pay scales. There was like the elite guys who got like 22% of the cap, the Mahomes, Burrow, Herbert, those got Lamar. And then there were like the second tier guys like Derek Carr who would get like 18%. And I would imagine that Goff is in that second tier, but Goff got 21% of the cap, which is like its own new thing. So either the tier 2 guys are getting a pay hike to go along with Goff, or the Lions see him as like a 1.5 tier quarterback, which to me is just like, it just blows my mind because I watch him play and the guy can't do any of the things that we want in a modern quarterback. But the Lions are like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that he averaged 1.9 yards under pressure in the playoffs. That does not matter to us. Let's give him $55 million a year.
Yeah, I don't know. And like the only way that I can really make sense of this is saying, oh, we're kind of living in a time of an unprecedented cap scale spike where we have $30 million added from last year, and that's a record. But still, I struggle to see how that quarterback contract becomes value, because I think the default talking point is, oh, in a couple of years it'll be fine, it'll be value. Well, for like the elite guys, yeah, like Josh Allen's contract, great value right now. When you have Lamar Jackson and and Joe Burrow and some of the other guys surpassing him in contract money, I would say now the Lamar Jackson contract is value because you have Lamar Jackson for less money than Jared Goff. That is value. Paying Jared Goff more money than guys who we know are at the top of the game, that's not value to me. And even if it becomes, and it will, surpassed by other guys in the next few years, what you have right now for the players you have, it's hard for me to say is value unless we're just saying that all quarterbacks who perform at or who are able to put up stats deserve these contracts, which I'm not willing to go that far.
No, it's like they spent like $200 on a toaster, and like the going market for like high tech toasters is $200, but you got a toaster that only makes toast, and you spent $200. You paid the same price as your neighbor whose toaster has like Wi-Fi and shit on it. That's what they did. Yeah. Like you need a toaster, you need to toast bread, but you need other stuff, and they spent so much money on it. I just think the resource allocation has been questionable. Even going back to last year, I know you're a fellow critic of their draft last year. I still think we haven't lost yet because our take was long-term. It's not the best thing. Like short-term, yeah, it's going to work for what they want right now. But drafting a tight end and an off-ball linebacker or a running back, just not a wise allocation of resources. And I think this is part of the same thing. Like, yes, keeping Jared Goff on this team for the next 2 years makes a lot of sense, and I think it gives him the best chance. But in 3 years, I think there's a chance that this is all a disaster and everything comes crashing down. And you're like, oh, we could have avoided this by just making like one or two different moves that didn't really change our short-term window, but opened up our window long-term.
Yeah. Look, I say this from experience, Lions fans. You might not get back. You really might not get back. What, you get close one time, then the GM starts maxing out the contracts. He goes, oh, we got our guys. We got there, right? Then it doesn't happen again. And yeah, I will concede the Lions draft take just for internet purposes because I'm not going to have the angry mob after me again. I don't care enough. But I will say, when you walk into a draft with the 6th and the 18th pick because of the Matthew Stafford trade, like that's the ammunition to go get a quarterback right there. Like you easily could have pulled off a trade that would have outdone Houston and what they did to get Will Anderson to get up to number 3 and then get Anthony Richardson last year. Like that was the blueprint. And then you have Jared Goff and Anthony Richardson behind one of the best offensive lines in football. and bang. And you still could have gotten Laporta at 35 with that trade as well. So,
and all you have to do is replace Gibbs, which you could do.
You can do, right? Which is easy to do. Right? You can go get Anthony Richardson and still walk out of that draft with Laporta and Brian Branch. You know, so and now you're in a spot where you're paying Jared Goff $53 million a year. He's the second highest paid quarterback in the league. Brad Holmes is barking at people, but to be honest, I don't really see how maxing out this roster with Jared Goff as the quarterback makes a whole lot of sense.
I've mentioned this a lot, but I'm going to say it one more time. And I know Lions fans are going to hate me for saying this, but you beat the baby Rams by 1 point. And you beat Baker Mayfield at home. Let's not start hanging banners for that playoff run. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah. And Jordan Love back for another year. Caleb Williams is in the division. We'll see how this shakes out over the next couple of years. Before we get to our ad break, last team puzzling offseason, Denver Broncos. They're really, really trying to sell us hard on Bo Nix being the goods, like on Bo Nix being a really special player. And Sean, come on, Sean.
You've tried this too many times too. Like, we would have taken your word for it. If you tried this in 2010, I would have been like, oh yeah, Bo Nix, I'm buying it. But we saw the Taysom Hill thing play out. We saw, like, he's drafted a lot of quarterbacks in New Orleans, and none of them were good. It was like Ian Book, Garrett Grayson, like a bunch of guys you've never seen play in the NFL ever. So like, I get that he's a great play caller and this great offensive mind, but when it comes to like the quarterback whisperer thing, has he earned that? Has he earned that benefit of the doubt besides Drew Brees, who was a Pro Bowler before he ever stepped foot in New Orleans? I don't know.
I don't think so. Not everyone has to be like the best developer of quarterback talent.
Right.
Like Sean got his quarterback, and we obviously saw that situation worked out for Drew and Sean for, it felt like damn near 20 years, right? Now the interesting part that I keep coming back to as the word that keeps popping in my mind as we keep looking at these teams is it's just hubris, dude. Like the fact that they thought they need to take Bo Nix at 12 when, like, in the lead up of the draft, they were the only team that was connected to Bo Nix as a first round prospect. You walk into the draft with 2 top 100 picks. You could have traded down. You could have traded down to like the bottom of the first round, collected a whole bunch of picks, and still probably gotten Bo Nix. And even if you don't, it's like, okay, well, we didn't get Bo Nix. That's not the end of the world. We still have a roster that has a ton of holes on it, and we'll figure it out another way. I don't get what they're doing. I don't get why they're trying to convince us that this is the smartest thing to do. And like, you're chasing Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes with Bo Nix. I don't.
And then another team that flunked its very easy uniform redesign test this offseason. Like, come on, man. I am of the belief that uniforms matter. Like, the Bucks changed their uniform back and they win a Super Bowl. The Browns went back to their old style uniforms, went to the playoffs with Baker Mayfield. The uniform matters, and missing that part, I don't have trust in this regime right now.
Yeah. Either way, the color of blue on the helmet is hideous. It's like one of the few shades of blue that is not pleasant to look at, and they managed to find it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a bad unit, and the orange is bad. I don't know, it's a lot of bad going on there. And then Bo Nix is wearing it. It's gonna be bad.
Yeah, so we pissed off 5 fan bases. I think we should pat ourselves on the back, and let's hear from our sponsors, and we'll be back with some teams who did a good job this offseason after the break. We are back with some teams who did not blow their offseason. Well, maybe they did, and we could be totally wrong. But teams who on the surface look like they have done a pretty good job this offseason. And let's start with everyone's favorite offseason champion, the New York Jets. I feel like I'm in the same spot as last year. It's like, hey, well, I feel like where we're at this year is more accentuated because of what happened with Rodgers. But it's like, hey, on paper, this looks pretty good, hashtag.
I feel a little crazy. I think they're going to be I feel more optimistic than I did at this time last year, having seen Rodgers bust his Achilles on the first game. But like, the roster, I feel like has a chance of actually winning a playoff game or two. I didn't feel that way last year.
Yeah. It's just, I feel, and I do think this roster is better than last year on paper. But then I just keep finding myself saying, if Rodgers stays healthy, if Tyron Smith stays healthy, if Mike Williams stays healthy, like, those are 3 pretty important things that need to happen for the Jets. And they're things that haven't had a whole lot of success happening in the past. But still, they've done a good job putting this roster together. It just kind of matters like if they can stay healthy, but it's going to be hard to find, especially if Rodgers can play back to the level where he was before he got hurt when he was with the Packers. That's obviously the big linchpin in this, but like they should have a top 5 defense again. The supporting cast is better than last year. I really appreciate them looking at their offensive tackle situation from last year and saying never again. Go out and get Tyron Smith. You go out and get Morgan Moses. You draft Fashanu with the 11th pick in the draft. I thought that those were all pretty shrewd moves of Joe Douglas because if you're going to have a 40-year quarterback coming off of an Achilles tear, I don't think he's going to be running around a whole lot, and you should try to protect him. So, yeah, it all makes sense. If I was a Jets fan, I would be excited, but they're also the Jets, you know?
Yeah, and then this is the one team where you have to be concerned about the home stadium turf playing a big factor, especially with the players they brought in. Like, my concern is that week 1, they're going to come out and do like a ritualistic ACL tearing where the whole team just tears their ACL at once. But like, if they avoid that and they can all stay healthy, I feel like the Mike Williams signing in particular is such a big one for them because Aaron Rodgers, if you give him that like back shoulder target, that outside guy who can win 50-50 balls, I think it just opens up the rest of the field. And then you give him a second receiver, he'll be his number 1 receiver in Garrett Wilson, where they showed like a lot of good like chemistry early on in preseason, like some Devontae Adams level chemistry. I think this has a chance to be a top 10 passing game. And I'm like not concerned at all about Nathaniel Hackett still being the OC, because if Aaron Rodgers is playing, he's not really going to be the OC. Aaron Rodgers is going to be the OC. He's going to be calling the shots at the line of scrimmage. And I have trust in him getting this offense where it needs to be. I do not have trust in Nathaniel Hackett doing that if Rodgers isn't behind center. But in this world we're living in, everyone stays healthy. Like, I think they have a chance to compete for the AFC East. I really do.
Yeah. And then once you get to the Super Bowl with a defense the playoffs with a defense like that, a Super Bowl run's possible. It's absolutely possible. You got to get there. You got to stay healthy, which is it's really the only concern I have about the Jets this year, because we've seen if Rodgers not going to stay healthy, that Nate Hackett thing's not going to work out at all. And you know, they have a lot of stars, but you know, I don't know how great the depth is on offense, especially at some of their skill spots. But you know, you're talking about an offense that has Tyron Smith, Fashanu, Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Breece Hall, Aaron Rodgers. It's right there if they can just keep it together. The Bears also pretty good offseason. Quarterback, two wide receivers that have like number 1 potential to go along with DJ Moore. They might actually be a real football team now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it came at the expense of my Carolina Panthers, but I feel like Ryan Poles, I have to take back anything I said about Ryan Poles. I feel like he's done a perfect job of allocating these resources that he did inherit. Like, he inherited maybe the best GM job in terms of resources, just because they had a lot of cap space. They had a lot of draft picks. He obviously improved that. But I think it's one thing to be able to trade for draft picks. And we saw like the Browns do that a couple years ago. I think it's another thing to actually utilize those and like find the right players. They didn't just find any old quarterback prospect. They didn't draft Baker Mayfield first overall. They got Caleb Williams. They got like I know we throw around generational too much, but I think he truly is a generational quarterback prospect. And he's been talked about like one for the last 2 years. That's who they landed with. And then you could see how the offensive pieces just make so much sense for them. Getting to Dunze is just like, that's just like a perfect match with what Caleb does. You have DJ Moore from the trade where you got Caleb Williams, which is a amazing sweetener. And then bringing in Keenan Allen, just the pieces just fell perfectly into place with how that receiving core lines up. I really like the job they've done. And then obviously the Sweat trade last year and the improvements on defense. This has a chance to be a really good team. And I think it's because of the offseason work the last 2 years that we've seen.
Yeah, this is not related to what you said because I agree with everything there. But I just want to say, I feel like people are sticklers about when people use the word generational. You know, like words have strict definition meanings, but they also expand past that to implied meanings and definitions. So when you say someone is a generational quarterback prospect, you know what they mean. All right. You know, don't get stuck with it. Oh, well, we had 3 generational quarterbacks. Yeah, they're just really good. Okay. Someone you should be excited about.
Like Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is the perfect thing. Like people will be like, oh, everyone said he was a generational prospect, even if his career doesn't work out. When have we ever seen a tight end prospect like that? We have never seen one like with that profile. Even if he doesn't work out, he was still generational prospect. That's why we call it prospect.
Right. Which is fine. But people get so mad. Like they get so mad and then they forget about like what the conversations were in the moment. Right. Which is also easier than ever with social media. Like you can just go search what people were saying about Kyle Pitts or Trevor Lawrence or any of these guys back in when they were coming out of the draft. So yeah, generational. I know we're going to get people who are upset about the use of that word, but get over it. It's fine. I do think, you know, when you look at where the Bears did this offseason, I would just be a little nervous if I was a Lions fan looking across the division. Like I'd be really happy that the Vikings weren't able to get Drake May, but the Packers have another quarterback, and the Bears, I think they have a quarterback who could be better than Jordan Love down the road. So, sheesh, it's the NFC North got really competitive overnight, and like, dude, even when you look at where Caleb Williams is now, and I don't really want to set the expectations too high because, I mean, it's a rookie quarterback. You know, bad things can happen, and bad things are going to happen throughout the season. But, dude, Darnell Wright, really good right tackle prospect. Braxton Jones, good enough for a left tackle for now. And then you add, and he gets to throw to DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze in year one. Like, if I was a Bears fan, I'd be like, yo, we kind of got to make the playoffs. We kind of got to make the playoffs.
They're like minus 125 to make the playoffs right now. And I don't even think that's crazy. Like, I would take those odds right now, especially with how the defense ended the season last year. This was the best defense in the NFL over the last like 12 weeks of the season, not even including all of the sweat trade. They showed that they could do some stuff, and I've been watching them on film. It's not just like the old Eberflus like cover 2, cover 3 defense. Like, he's doing some more stuff. He has more pieces, so I'm really excited to see this team. I think Chicago should be excited. This is not Mitch Trubisky 2018 hype. This is real.
Yeah, this is real. All right, we got 2 more teams we're going to get out of here. The Patriots. Look, this is a long haul process, right? I think people who are excited about the Patriots for this year probably a little, you know, jumping the gun a little bit, but for building a foundation of what can be successful over the next few years, I think they kind of nailed it. Getting Drake May, I really like they didn't overthink it, you know, because you could have gone in a couple different directions with the Drake May stuff, right? One, you can say, we're not ready for a quarterback prospect, we're going to trade down. Or you can do what I think the smart thing was, we have a quarterback prospect sitting right here, let's just take him and we'll figure out the rest later. I don't know if Drake May is going to have, like, from a statistical standpoint, a great rookie year, but I do feel like we should be able to watch him play this year and say, yep, that's the guy that's going to work out for the Patriots over the next few years.
Yeah, and I like the work they did before the draft, like re-signing Kyle Duggar, Christian Barmore, and I think there was one more big signing. Like they're locking up their young defensive core. I like them doing that. I like not letting good young players leave the building, and I think they've done that. And then early returns in Gerard Mayo, like I like the hire. I know it wasn't the most creative hire, hiring someone in-house, but I think he could probably give you the best of both worlds. He can give you some of the good, like the structure that Bill Belichick provided that did work, that still works. And then the players' side of things, having that perspective, I think it just makes a massive difference. And it goes against everything they've been doing, hiring coaches over the last couple of years. They've been hiring hard-ass coaches who can't really relate with players. I think doing this changes that locker room for the better. And then you throw a young, exciting rookie. Like, that changes everything for a franchise. You have a quarterback that you can get excited for in the first round. It doesn't matter how much games you lose, as long as he shows some promise, you're happy about the season. And that's what's, not to circle back to Atlanta, but that's what's so disappointing about that pick. Is like, you get nothing from it. There's nothing redeeming about that pick this year.
Unless Kirk gets hurt. And then it's just the worst of everything that you could have possibly imagined. Or if Kirk is bad and you have to bench him. It's just a stupid team.
I have a question. Would you rather have Jacoby Brissett and Drake May or Kirk Cousins? And Michael Penix.
Brissett and Drake May, for sure.
And one of those ones was way more expensive than the other one, even factoring in the draft capital you had to give up to get May.
Yeah. Tough offseason. But Patriots, slow burn, but they might be back. And also on the Gerard Mayo front, I know it's not a sexy hire, but this was a guy who was, like, other teams were interested in hiring for several years now. So it's not like he was just totally unmerited for the job. And I'm rooting for him. I think that he was a good hire for where they are right now. Like, I think the process makes a whole lot of sense. Whether or not it ends up working out remains to be seen. But it's hard to be upset like with the steps they've taken to end up where they are right now. And I really like just not overthinking it and then taking Drake May, and we're gonna see what happens. Last team we're gonna talk about today, Kansas City Chiefs. Brutal time for the rest of the AFC, man. Because I will say, with any other team, if you told me they added Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, I'd be like, okay, all right, we'll see what happens. But you did it with a team that just won the Super Bowl with teams with receivers that are a lot worse than Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy. So like even just getting Mahomes back to baseline, like starting wide receiver talent is terrifying.
Yeah. I don't think people realize that he got better last year. Like he took another step last year, and his team was just so bad that it was hard to recognize unless you were watching like every snap, every game. And they're at the Patriots point at this point in their little dynastic run, where no matter who they sign, you just see the best version, the best outcome possible. Like I remember the Patriots signed like Cordero Patterson, and I was like, oh man, Belichick's going to turn him into a running back. He's going to turn him into a star. It actually happened in Atlanta, but like none of that stuff ever happens. But with the Chiefs, it feels real. It feels like a possibility. Like I really think Mahomes is going to get the best out of Hollywood Brown. I think he's going to get the most out of Worthy, whatever that looks like as a rookie. But this offseason, not losing too much. They lose Snead, but they keep Chris Jones. And then they add some dynamic talent on offense. Like that was the ideal offseason for a Super Bowl champ, and they just had it. And I think there's a chance they're even better next year, which, like you said, scary thought.
Yeah, it just says a lot about where they were last year. That you add Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy, and it was like, holy, we're so bad. and they just won the Super Bowl. Like this is terrifying. And you going back to that, the Chiefs Ravens game that we were at, to when Mahomes threw that touchdown pass to Kelsey on their first drive, I was like, oh, this is done. He's like whatever iteration of this offense that they needed to figure out. Oh, they've figured it out, and now it's better. And not even that, but like you have a legitimate. I think it's going to take some time, obviously, but a legitimate like franchise left tackle prospect in Kingsley Suamataia, who has just had the runway open for him because Wanya Morris just got arrested on the weed charge. So, it's going to be a young offense. It's probably going to have its ups and downs, but you got 15, man. You got 15.
And Kelsey's going to be better than he was during the regular season last year, you would imagine, because if he's healthy. We don't know what's going to happen with Rashid Rice between now and September, but he really came on in the playoffs. He was like basically outproducing Travis Kelce, basically. So, another MVP season for Pat is what I would guess is going to happen.
Which is fine. It's fun. Like I know there are a lot of people who are starting to get sick of the Chiefs, but dude, it is so much fun watching Mahomes go supernova and just blowing the entire defense down, just torching everybody.
Selfishly, we go to the playoff games, we don't cover games during the regular season too much. Watching that man play live is that's an experience that I don't want to. I hope he's in the Super Bowl every year that I cover.
Yeah, it's just different. It's different, and he's one of one. And I really don't even know like what it would take for me to say he's not the best quarterback in the league. There's just no point.
He'd have to lose his right arm. That's like he would literally have to lose it. Like someone would have to machete it off.
He's thrown left-handed touchdowndowns though, so
that's a good point. I'd still put him over like Tua in my rankings. I mean, they would both be right-handers pretending to be left-handers at that point.
Who gets drafted higher, Mahomes with one arm or Michael Penix? In terms of going lefties,
I'm taking Mahomes.
That'll do it for this episode of the Exempt List. Steven, you said you're not working. Do you still have anything you want to let people know about coming down the pipeline, or other things you're working on before we get out of here?
Yeah, we're in the early stages of redesigning the quarterback rankings, so those will be coming in a couple months. So you guys will have plenty to yell at me in August. Between now and then, not so much.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm going to try and hide for the next couple of months outside of some of the podcast appearances. So yes, that's going to do it for this episode of the Exempt List. We have a summer schedule change. Zero Bliss podcast with Frank Schwab and Jason Fitz will be next up on Thursday. I will be back next Wednesday with our dear friend Kevin Clark, who's going to be coming on the show. I'm Charles McDonald. You can find me on Twitter at @4vert. Steven is on Twitter at the Steven Ruiz. Thanks to Joe DeLeon for helping us out behind the glass. Thanks to Hillary for stepping in for helping produce this episode. And we will see you next Wednesday with ESPN's Kevin Clark.